At the beginning of this adventurous and thrilling story, we are introduced to a lady named Lucy, who is standing in front of a large company with her friend. Lucy used to do small-time thefts to earn money, and her friend was involved in similar illegal activities. One day, Lucy's friend gives her a task and says that she needs to somehow take a suitcase into a building and hand it over to a man named Mr. Jang. In return for this task, they would get $1,000. However, Lucy refuses, saying she wouldn't do the job for such a small amount of money, especially since it could put her life in danger. She demands at least $100, but her friend, who is quite cunning, knows how to manipulate her. He quickly ties a lock around her wrist, attaching it to the suitcase, and now Lucy has no choice but to carry out the task, otherwise, the suitcase cannot be opened. Her friend simply tells her to go inside, deliver the suitcase to Mr. Jang, and return. With no other option, Lucy reluctantly enters the building and asks the receptionist about Mr. Jang. But as soon as she sees her friend, someone suddenly kills him. Many agents from inside the building have arrived, and they capture Lucy, taking her to another room. Lucy keeps screaming, but no one listens to her. Later, we find out that all these people are Mr. Jang's men, and Mr. Jang had her friend killed because he suspected that they were investigating him. Mr. Jang, a powerful and wealthy businessman, has committed many illegal activities and murders, but none of this has ever come to light. Now, they lock Lucy in a room, and Mr. Jang comes to her, asking her what is inside the suitcase. Lucy, trembling with fear, says that she knows nothing about it and that it was her friend who gave it to her, asking her to deliver it to Mr. Jang. Hearing this, Mr. Jang is slightly surprised and wonders who would want to deliver the suitcase to him, and what could possibly be inside it. So, Mr. Jang gives Lucy a paper with the code to open the suitcase lock and steps back. He tells her that she must input the code and open the suitcase because he needs to find out what's inside. Lucy becomes even more terrified, fearing there might be a bomb inside. Mr. Jang casually responds that perhaps her friend had placed a bomb inside, intending to take his life. Lucy, scared, says she can't do it and pleads to be let go. Upon hearing this, all of Mr. Jang's agents point their guns at her. Forced by the situation, Lucy has no choice but to input the code and open the suitcase. When she opens it, she finds 4 blue-colored packets inside. These turn out to be highly potent drugs. When Mr. Jang and his associates realize there's no bomb inside, they come to inspect the drugs. They want to test how the drugs work, so they call in a man and ask him to consume them. The man takes the drugs, but within minutes, his condition deteriorates. He begins to behave erratically, acting like a madman, and starts looking at Lucy in a disturbing way. Mr. Jang and his team are confused, not understanding how these drugs are affecting him. To make things clear, Mr. Jang pulls out his gun and shoots the man in front of Lucy. Afterward, Mr. Jang tells Lucy that he has an important job for her, which will be beneficial for her. Lucy quickly realizes that her life is in danger, and she repeatedly refuses to do the job, begging to be let go. But one of Mr. Jang's men standing nearby walks over, punches Lucy, and knocks her unconscious. The scene then shifts, and we see a committee at a large university. A professor is giving a speech to the audience, explaining the development of the world. The professor mentions that all living beings on Earth can only use about 1% of their brain capacity. The professor was saying that all the living creatures on Earth can only use about 3% of their brain capacity. However, humans, who are a step above, can use 10% of their brain. This is why we are much more intelligent than other animals. But research has revealed that dolphins, living in the ocean, can use 20% of their brain. This means that they are, in a sense, far more intelligent than humans. If humans were able to use 20% of their brain, they would be able to control their entire body. If we could use 40% of our brain, we would even be able to read and control the thoughts of other people. There are still many things we need to learn about how our brain works. However, within the committee, there were some people who thought the professor's claims were ridiculous. But then, a student asked, what would happen if a person could use 100% of their brain? The professor replied, I don't know. That might never happen. But if it did, we would evolve to such an extent that we could never even imagine. The scene then shifts back to Lucy, who is regaining consciousness. She feels intense pain in her abdomen because someone had cut her there. When Lucy sees medical equipment around her, she starts to worry that they might have taken some of her organs. After a while, several people arrive and take her, bringing her in front of Mr. Jang. Lucy is terrified, thinking they might kill her. But soon, a doctor steps forward and explains that they haven't removed any of her organs. Instead, they've implanted the same blue-colored drug packets inside her stomach. Lucy realizes she's not alone, many other people have been captured, and the same drugs have been implanted inside their bodies. Now, they are given instructions to deliver the drugs to various locations. They are warned that if anyone tries to be clever or escapes, their parents will be killed. The group is told their locations, and they begin preparing for their deliveries. The other people had black cloths tied over their faces so they couldn't see anything. Lucy was then taken into a room where some people were present, to whom she had to deliver the drug packets. However, one of the men, instead of focusing on the drugs, started behaving very inappropriately with Lucy. When she refused and tried to push him away, the man became enraged and started beating Lucy's abdomen severely. He hit her so hard that she eventually passed out. The brutal beating caused the drug packets inside her stomach to rupture, and the dangerous blue drugs mixed with her blood, slowly spreading throughout her body. Lucy's eyes and blood vessels began to change as if she was undergoing some sort of developmental process. A short time later, Lucy suddenly stood up on her feet and sat on a chair. Shortly after, another man entered and tried to force himself on her, but this time, without fear, Lucy killed him. She quickly exited the room, grabbed a gun, and began to systematically kill everyone one by one. Lucy then sat down at a table and began eating. However, she was shot in the shoulder, but this time, she didn't react at all. She simply reached into her shoulder and removed the bullet herself, as if the injury didn't cause her any pain. Lucy then dressed herself and left the building. She killed one man on her way out and sat in the driver's seat of a car. Soon, she arrived at a hospital, and it was clear that Lucy had changed. She walked into an operating theater and started going through the medical reports of a patient being treated by the doctors. Lucy quickly understood the patient's condition and how much time the person had left. She immediately took out her gun and killed the patient. She told the doctors that the patient was about to die anyway, and she had just made their job easier. The biggest question, however, was how Lucy was able to know all these things. The reason behind all of this is the blue-colored drug that had mixed with Lucy's body. Now, her brain usage increased to 20%, allowing her to control her body and perceive everything around her. She could sense and process all the sounds and movements in the environment. Lucy now had full control over her body and could read the minds of those around her. Lucy, with her newfound abilities, threatened the doctors at gunpoint, demanding that they remove the drugs from her stomach immediately. With no other choice, the doctors began the operation. Lucy chose to undergo the surgery without anesthesia, and while the doctors worked on her, she called her mother. She told her mother that she could feel everything from the air to the sound of the flowing water. She even remembered her childhood and expressed her gratitude to her mother for raising her to be strong enough to stand on her own feet. After the surgery, the doctors managed to remove the drugs, but they were baffled at how Lucy was still alive after having so many drugs inside her body. Lucy understood, however, that she didn't have much time left to live, so she quickly left the hospital. Lucy's first stop was Mr. Zhang's location, where she had been killing his men. Now, standing in front of Mr. Zhang, who seemed relaxed and unbothered, Lucy immediately attacked him with 2 knives, striking his hands. She then demanded to know where Mr. Zhang had sent the other people who had drugs implanted in them like her. Mr. Zhang arrogantly replied that she would never find out. But in the next moment, Lucy placed her hand on his head and began reading his mind. She was now able to access his thoughts. Using her newly discovered powers, Lucy discovered where Mr. Zhang had sent the innocent people to deliver the drugs. It was clear that the drugs were not only affecting her body but also severely damaging her brain, leaving her in a deteriorating state mentally. Now, Lucy was able to use more than 20% of her brain, and she could easily read people's minds. After extracting all the information she needed, she went to an old friend's place, where she was using his laptop to gather more details. Lucy, who had never been good with technology before, was now using the laptop in such a professional way that it was beyond the capabilities of an average person. She had gathered all the information about the drugs and her newfound brain abilities. She then discovered Professor Samuel, who had been working on brain abilities for years. Lucy read all his research and quickly called him. She told him, "I've read all your research, and I understand everything perfectly." Professor Samuel thought she was joking, as his research had taken years to complete, and it was impossible for an ordinary person to remember all of it. But suddenly, Lucy appeared on his TV screen and began controlling it. Lucy had now started using 28% of her brain, which allowed her to control all electronic devices around her. She explained to Professor Samuel, "Everything written in your research is completely correct. I have some drugs in my body that are gradually increasing my brain's usage percentage. I want to meet you soon to figure out what I should do next." Professor Samuel, astonished, asked her to meet him as soon as possible. Lucy quickly changed her appearance and made her way to the airport. By now, she realized that the people who still had the drugs inside their bodies were also traveling to other countries by plane. So, Lucy used her brain's abilities to inform all the police officers at the airport that those people had drugs in their bodies and should be arrested immediately. She even sent their photos using her mind, and the police officers, following her instructions, managed to capture and arrest them. Lucy was now using 50% of her brain capacity, which had taken her abilities to a whole new level. Her body had become increasingly volatile, almost turning into a dust-like substance. Panicking, Lucy ran to the washroom and locked herself in, taking more of the blue drugs from her bag. Soon, she lost consciousness, and her body almost disintegrated into fine particles. The scene faded to black. Later, Lucy woke up in a hospital, now fully aware that she was using 50% of her brain. This newfound ability had made her even more powerful. Meanwhile, an inspector and his team had been assigned to keep an eye on her, suspecting that she might have hidden a bomb inside her body. As soon as Lucy stepped outside, the inspector aimed his gun at her. But Lucy, now capable of controlling 50% of her mind, effortlessly incapacitated the entire team with just a glance. Professor Samuel had mentioned that when a person uses 40% of their brain, they can easily control others, and Lucy was now capable of such feats. She demanded that the inspector take her to the 3 criminals they had caught at the airport, who were being prepared for surgery to remove the drugs from their bodies. As she entered the facility, Lucy noticed that her brain's power had expanded beyond just people. She could now easily listen to citizens' phone calls, surpassing even technology. Through this heightened ability, Lucy learned that Mr. Jang's men had arrived at the hospital to extract the drugs from the criminals' bodies. Without hesitation, Lucy proceeded with the inspector to confront them. As soon as they reached the area, Mr. Jang's men opened fire on her, but Lucy's power had increased to such an extent that she eliminated them without even touching them. Lucy had now reached an even higher level of mental power. Using 50% of her brain capacity, she effortlessly lifted all the weapons into the air and sent her enemies flying one by one. She moved forward, collecting the suitcase full of drug packets and handing them over to the police inspector, instructing him to accompany her. The inspector, who had just witnessed such extraordinary abilities, thought that Lucy no longer needed him. However, Lucy replied that she wanted him to always remember her as a good reminder, so he would stay with her from that point on. As Lucy and the inspector left in a car, Mr. Jang, who had seen them, became furious. He sent his best fighters after them. Meanwhile, Lucy and the inspector were on their way to meet Professor Samuel. The professor had gathered all his colleagues and other experts to meet Lucy. When Lucy arrived and began sharing her experiences, one professor was skeptical and refused to believe her. In response, Lucy placed her hand on the professor's head and revealed something no one knew. Years ago, your 6-year-old daughter died in an accident. The professor was shocked, as this was a personal secret he had never shared with anyone. The other doctors and professors began to trust Lucy, realizing that her abilities were beyond their understanding. Lucy then shared her insights with Professor Samuel and the others about what happens when a human's brain capacity increases. Her mental power had advanced to such an extent that she could morph her hand into different forms, from 1 hand to 2, then 3, and manipulate any object or energy with just her mind. She began to explain that mathematics and numbers were human-made constructs, and in reality, such concepts didn't exist. At this point, Professor Samuel, still curious, asked, if mathematics doesn't exist, then how are calculations possible? Lucy, now operating at an even more advanced mental level, likely had the ability to explain the deeper truths of existence, and possibly how things beyond the physical world, like numbers, could be transcended or understood differently. As Lucy continued to explain her theories about the nature of reality, she used an example to make it clearer. She described a car spinning in circles at high speed, eventually reaching a point where it seemed to disappear. However, she clarified that the car wasn't disappearing at all, it was just that the speed was so high that it couldn't be perceived anymore. This, she explained, was all relative to spacetime. It was spacetime that defined the evolution of humans and everything around them, making them what they were. The doctors and professors were stunned by Lucy's abilities and insights into the true nature of existence. But the situation took a darker turn. Mr. Jang's men had infiltrated the laboratory, and they were there with a clear mission, to kill Lucy. They surrounded the lab, armed with advanced weapons. The inspector, recognizing the danger, warned Lucy that time was running out and they were being overwhelmed. Lucy, however, remained calm. She turned to the professors and asked them to inject the remaining doses of the drug into her body, as she wanted to use 100% of her brain power to build a supercomputer. This supercomputer would store all her experiences and the data that could help humanity in the future. Professor Samuel hesitated, warning her that such a decision would likely mean certain death. But Lucy had already accepted the truth, she wouldn't survive much longer with the drugs in her system. However, she believed that her sacrifice could benefit humanity in ways that would be far more significant than her own survival. Trusting Professor Samuel, the professors reluctantly agreed and began injecting the remaining drugs into her system. As the drugs took effect, Lucy's brain power surged. She began to use 70% of her brain's capacity. With this new power, she started to gather energy from the metal objects around her, converting it into black matter. This black matter began to spread, forming a supercomputer that seemed to take on a life of its own. As the dosage increased, so did Lucy's abilities. Her body was slowly transforming, merging with the black matter as she continued to use 80% of her brain power. She was becoming more than just a human, she was becoming the very supercomputer she had envisioned. As Lucy continued to unlock more of her brain's potential, she reached a point where she could manipulate time itself. She began to travel through time, moving from one corner of the Earth to another in mere seconds. At first, Lucy couldn't fully comprehend what was happening to her, but with each passing moment, she started to understand her newfound abilities. When she reached 90% brain usage, she traveled to the past, to a time when humans did not exist and dinosaurs roamed the Earth. A dinosaur approached her, but before it could attack, Lucy shifted again in time, finding herself in a different era. This time, she witnessed the evolution of a monkey gradually transforming into a human. Lucy realized that she was witnessing the dawn of humanity, a process that took millions of years for the human brain to develop fully. As Lucy's brain usage reached 99%, her powers became godlike. She was able to observe the entire process of generation and evolution across the universe and Earth. Lucy had transcended human limitations. She could now create and destroy entire planets, experiencing existence as something beyond physical form. She no longer felt her own body, as if she had become part of the very fabric of spacetime itself. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Lucy's physical body continued to evolve towards 100% brain usage. But at that moment, Mr. Jang appeared, gun in hand, to confront her. However, just as he raised his weapon, Lucy activated her full 100% brain capacity, causing her physical form to disappear entirely. Instead, she dispersed into space, becoming a presence that could no longer be confined by the laws of physics. The inspector, having rushed to the lab, managed to kill Mr. Jang. Afterward, Lucy, now fully transformed into black matter, extracted a pen drive containing all her data, knowledge, experiences, and everything that could be used to build a supercomputer. She handed the pen drive to Professor Samuel, the one she trusted to use it for the greater good of humanity. As the inspector stood there, trying to comprehend what had just happened, he asked Lucy where she had gone. Just then, his phone received a message that read, "I am everywhere." Lucy was no longer bound by time or space. She had become an omnipresent force, existing everywhere and nowhere at once. Meaning, after Lucy started using 100% of her brain, she completely lost herself in spacetime, and now she doesn't need her physical body. She can travel easily from one dimension to another and go anywhere. In the end, it is explained that since the beginning of human civilization, they have always had a very important computer, which is their own brain. However, recent humans have used their brains only for their personal benefit, to make money and advance. Only a few people use a higher percentage of their brain to do good for human civilization. And with that, our adventurous story ends here.